These butterfly earrings may look complicated, but I'm going to show you step by step everything you need to know to make yourself a personalized pair. Hey there, Sandy here. Welcome to another polymer clay tutorial at keepsakecrafts.net. We'll start by extruding very fine strands of clay. I'm using a 1mm round extruder disc here. This video is about making earrings, so all of the size references are for that scale. But if you want to make something larger, like a pendant or a piece of wall art, you can adjust your sizes accordingly. Here's the pattern we're going to use in this project. This very smallest one will be the earrings. By the way, if you're one of my patrons, you will be able to download this pattern, which I drew just for this project. Thanks to all of you who support my art and this channel. I couldn't do it without you. You can also just find a picture of a butterfly to trace and use that. It's easiest if you have a glass a little smaller than this one, one that's close or similar in size to what you want to make, so you can easily lift it up and move it around. Just cut out your pattern and then tape it to the back of the piece of glass. One thing I noticed was that with a thicker piece of glass, there's a little bit more distortion. So if you can find a thin piece of glass, that's helpful too, but it's doable however you do it. Start by creating the interior details of your butterfly. You can see I have a palette here full of my strands of clay, and actually I want to cut these in half. I think I ended up using like 5 or 6 of these 12-inch strands for a butterfly. The secret to this is to use a light touch. So I'll start with this largest one here. Just gently tap down one end and then guide the strand around to follow the shape. I like to use rounded tools for the guiding, such as this 1/8 inch ball tool. I can hold it where that should loop around. And then just outline it, gently tap it down. And even though I have my craft knife nearby for trimming, it's very easy to leave nicks and dings in the clay, so a round tool leaves a nicer finish. I also use the end of a very thin but still round tool like a Sculpey Etch and Pearl to move and carry the very small pieces onto the design. If you're making a butterfly with 2 symmetrical wings, I recommend you work on both wings at once, doing the mirrored sections one after the other. I always find it a little harder to do the left-hand side since I'm right-handed, but doing them this way means you get pretty close symmetry. Oops, did I just mush that? Yeah, and don't be afraid to just chop off a piece if you wreck it. Stick it over here and try again. Now what you're going to see when all is said and done are the interiors of these pieces. So that's where you want to focus. Getting nice is what does the interior shape look like. And if you can close these loops, that helps too, because we're going to fill the outside in another step. If you can't get that end exactly where you want it, just get it close and then you can trim off the excess. It's not sticking, which is amazing because it's like incredibly humid here today. So start with the larger sections first. And if you wreck any of your bits, sometimes they get stretched out of shape or they'll end up lumpy, just trim it off. It's easy enough to extrude some more and you don't use that much anyways. Now to make these small teardrop shapes, start by cutting your extruded clay into 1.5 inch pieces. Then fold it in half, meeting the cut ends. And you can do 2 at a time, so you end up with 2 that are about the same size. And start pinching from the cut end towards the rounded end until your teardrop is the size you want. So I'm going for that shape, so I need it a little smaller. And you can then trim off the excess and place the teardrop on your design. Here's a simple trick for making these little circles. Just grab a longish strand of clay and loop it over itself. Pull it as tight as you need to make the size loop you want, and then cut right where those overlap. Kind of lay your finger on there to hold that down, and just lightly, and then, yeah, Kind of pulls it out of position, but that's okay. Pull the excess away. You can then nudge those cut ends back together and pop it in place. Now you may find for the smaller design, like the earrings, that you're going to need to simplify this pattern. So instead of 2 loops here, I'll have just 1, and instead of these 2, I'll combine them into 1. And here also, instead of 4 loops, I'll have just 2. You can see that on this one where I've simplified the design just a bit. Once you have all of the interior details in place, then add the outlines. Again, just start with your 6-inch pieces. Tap it in place gently. Try to keep it untwisted. You can kind of untwist it if you did twist it and get the kinks out. But if you did it too much, just start with a fresh piece so you have nice, smooth curves. Don't worry about the messy cut ends on the interior of the butterfly. Just get the inner shapes as you want them and the outer outline nice. We'll take care of the rest in the next step. Now this I've kind of squashed a bit. Start with a fresh one. And repeat to add the outline on the other side. Of course, you could save yourself some work. You could do half the work if you would like your butterfly earrings to be just a side view of a butterfly and only have one wing. That would be another approach. Let me know in the comments below which you prefer, 1 wing or 2 wings. I have to say I kind of like 1 wing because then I don't have to worry about symmetry, but they're beautiful either way. There. Now you can bake it at the manufacturer's recommended temperature for 30 minutes. Here's one I did earlier on a more appropriate size piece of glass. You can always just use a piece of glass that comes in a picture frame, and you can tape the edges with some washi tape. We'll use liquid clay to fuse all of these pieces together. Now, unless you're doing a very large piece, the nozzle that comes with the liquid clay is much too big. So you want to pour out a puddle on your work surface, and then use a toothpick to pick up small drops and fill in the areas between the shapes. So those ovals and circles, that's what our design is going to show behind. So we don't want to fill those in. We want to fill in all of the spaces around them. You also want to fill in the areas where you have 2 strands of clay next to each other. And the best way to do that is to start with a drop, tuck it into a space, and then pull. And can you see you got that strand coming out? That's really all you need, is a little strand of clay. I know it's hard to see, it's black on black, but we're just filling in that gap so it's a nice smooth outline. Carry on until you have all of the spaces in between your teardrops and ovals and circles filled in. So there's our outline. You'll want to pick it up and kind of tilt it and look at it in different angles and make sure you have it nice and smooth. The liquid clay has a nice surface tension that makes it round up, so when you fill in those areas between 2 logs, you get a real nice smooth look. So now we're going to add, I'm going to mess things up. Oh my goodness. That's okay. Any excess, like here, that can scrape off after baking. But yeah, try to be a little more careful than me. Goodness. Anyways, add a little bit of liquid clay in between the wings where the body will go. You won't make nearly as much of a mess as I just do. Now we're going to shape a tapered log. That will be the body. And you can follow your pattern to get an idea for the size and shape. And then just use a flat tool. I'm just following my pattern and press in a few lines for details. That's all. No big deal. And then you can pop your body in place gently. Here's a tiny ball of clay for the head, and I'm going to use the toothpick and just pick up a little dab of liquid clay. Put that on the top of the body, and then you can just kind of roll the head into place. Yeah. I've got some cleaning up to do after I bake it, but that's okay. You can bake it with all this on here, and then the excess will just peel right off after baking. So bake that again for 45 minutes. Here's one I did earlier. You can leave the outline for your butterfly black, but I wanted mine to look more like silver jewelry. And you can do this in a few different ways. I made some samples here. These are all just little black coils that I colored with different kinds of paint. You might have something else, and I would suggest that you do samples. So this first one is a Decocolor paint marker. It comes in lots of colors. It comes in gold, rose gold, so you can get different colors if you want. The most important thing is that you have to put it back in the oven at polymer clay baking temperatures for half an hour or so to cure it. Otherwise, it will scratch right off. See, at this point, that's not coming off, so that's good. The best way to use this on polymer is to actually put it on raw polymer, but where we're using the liquid clay, that's not going to work in this case. This is my favorite. I like this shiny finish. One thing that I tried that didn't work as well as I expected is vintage patinas. That just scrapes right off. Bummer, so don't use that. Another thing I did was just painted over some plain old clear liquid clay and then sprinkled it with some silver mica powder. It's a different look, but it looks pretty good. Looks silver and is very sparkly. And if you want a more subdued silver look, you can try Swelligant metal coatings. And that is on there permanently. All of these I would recommend. Well, I wouldn't recommend that one, but these go back in the oven for like a half an hour to set the paint or cure the liquid clay or set the paint marker. So before you add your backing, you want to color this. Here's my butterfly after baking. It peeled right up off the glass, and you want to do that before you paint because it makes the next, well, step after the next a little easier. In order to paint it, you can stick it back on the glass and it will stick kind of like a window cling. But because we've peeled it up, it'll be easier to peel it up after we've added our paint pen. The way these work is you shake them up, and I've done a video on using these pens. I will link to that. But then you have to pump it a bit to get it flowing. And you do want it flowing because when it's flowing, you get this really nice smooth finish. So if you need to, if it starts getting clumpy as you're working, then just shake it some more, pump it up some more, and get the whole thing covered. And you do want to lift this up and see if you're getting like all of those inside edges. It's okay to be messy here. Get it flowing again. Just cover your whole piece. Don't worry about making a mess on the inside. Just make sure the whole thing is covered nicely. I've had good results with the Decocolor paint marker and the brand of polymer clay I use, which is usually Primo or Sculpey Soufflé. But I strongly recommend that you do tests with your brands of clay. It's entirely possible that it may not dry, it might stay sticky, and that would be tragic. So make sure you do some tests, and if it doesn't work, then just choose a different method of coloring. Or, of course, you can always make your butterfly strands in a color and use liquid clay in the final color that you want. Now this is why we lifted it off the glass after baking, so it's not stuck real well. I'm just gonna grab my clay blade and go in there and lift it up and move it over. And now we've left all of that mess behind. You can let this dry. First let it air dry and then bake it to set the paint. Once your butterfly outline is colored, the final color you want it to be, you can choose a design to go behind it. If you want a lot of detail in the clay that goes behind the outline of your butterfly, then choose a design that has a small scale and lots of contrast. Like this one, I think works really well. It looked especially good behind the black, and I was really surprised to see how good this really bold design works. This has a bold contrast, and it shows up rather nicely, whereas the crackle and the stripe that I thought would look good are just kind of, they're not super exciting. If you want subtle color, a simple polymer clay blend or a stripy sheet like this will do nicely. And you can still choose specific areas by angling it. I settled on this design. I love the magenta color, which happens to be the 2023 color of the year, but I just love it anyways. And it's kind of a happy medium between a lot of contrast and some subtle design. And I'm going to cut it at an angle just to kind of maximize the areas I want. You can see I already marked this side where I want it. So now I'll mark this side, because since it's a butterfly, I am going to kind of mirror image the direction of this design, and just choose what you want to show behind each section. And what I've done here is I've just kind of made a mark at the head and at the tail. And then I can connect those lines. This is just maximizing my small piece of veneer that I have. And then those will go together, because that seam will be hidden behind the body. Make sure I'm still happy with it. Then add just a very, very thin layer of liquid clay to the back of your butterfly outline and put it in place, and then you can use a craft knife to cut it out. This can be the backing for your piece, or you can add another piece of polymer clay behind it. Just keep in mind these are earrings, so you want to keep these sheets of clay fairly thin or they will get rather heavy. Just take your time and cut that out. For findings to hang your earrings, drill a hole about the center of the top edge of each wing, and then add a jump ring to each hole and a length of chain connecting the jump rings. Then you can add an earring finding to the center of the chain. But now that you know this design, you need to check out all the other possibilities in the butterfly and dragonfly playlist I put together for you. See you in the next video.